Hey, folks. Welcome to Opening Doors. My name is Alastair Moock, and I'm very excited to be welcoming Dan and Claudia Zanes today for our second show in the series. Our first show a month ago was with Vance Gilbert, and we are now underway. It looks like we got people tuning in. I'll be looking for your comments. If you want to share where you're watching from, I'd love to hear. Hey, Andy. Nice to see you. That's Mr. Red Yarn. Steve Almond is watching. Hey, Steve. Good to see you. Well, I'll keep looking for y'all. So my guests tonight are Dan and Claudia Zanes. Dan was a founder with his brother Warren and others of the Boston band the Del Fuegos, big rock band here in Boston. I just missed it in my coming to here in '95. I think they were just about at the point of moving on, or maybe they just had a band I spent a lot of time, ended up playing with the Swinging Stakes. Paul Kohansky and Jamie Walker were around that same scene at the same time. It's a Boston that I feel like I just missed out on. When pay was a little better, there were more venues to be had. The grass is always greener, I suppose. But Dan went on to a solo career in children's music, family music, where he really reinvented the genre. Brought along some of his pals from the music business and raised the bar for independent homemade family music. Brought people like the Blind Boys of Alabama and Sheryl Crow and Natalie Merchant, Father Goose, into the studio with him and made really wonderful albums. He's also been a real advocate for anti-racism before the term was in vogue. He helped start a group called Constructive White Conversations. And we're going to talk about that tonight. It's a white affinity anti-racist group based in New York, but they've been doing a lot of work online during the pandemic. So it's open to everybody, everywhere. And also tonight is Claudia Eliaza. I'll have to make sure I get that right. Zanes. And Claudia spent much of her career as a music therapist, worked with I think kids and adults on sensory issues. Was also a jazz singer, is a jazz singer, and when she's not busy doing all that, she's making beautiful soaps. And these two creative, beautiful people met and teamed up, and now, as a new married couple, or well, not that new. We'll talk about when. They have been traveling this country and the world, making music for families. So please welcome Dan and Claudia Zanes. Hey guys.
Thank you, Alastair. And nice job on my last name. That was good.
Did I get it? Okay.
You got it.
All right, good. So nice to see you guys. You're always looking so sharp.
Oh, thank you.
Set the bar high. It's hard.
Hey man, you got a nice plaid shirt on.
Oh, thanks, brother. You know, skinny guys can find all the good stuff in the used thread stores. Us bigger guys, we take what we can off the shelf. You know, I'd love to just start with some music. If you guys be willing to jump in with a couple of tunes, and then we'll come back and talk.
Sure. Yeah, we'd love to. So this first song we're going to do is a tune we wrote back in 2020. Let Love Be Your Guide. It was inspired by, of course, the late Congressman John Lewis. We've just been inspired by his life, his legacy, and the fact that he wrote this op-ed to be released on the day of his funeral. We read that and we were inspired. The words just kind of fell off the page, and we wrote this tune called Let Love Be Your Guide. It's something I must tell you now. Let love be your guide. The longing of the human heart knows how to let love be your guide.
Well, I stood among you and I knew. Let love be your guide. It was clear what you were here to do. Let love be your guide. Be your guide when you're weary. Be your guide when you're unsure. The winds of change are on your side. Let love be your guide. History tells us this is not new. Let love be your guide. Yesterday's lessons still hold true. Let love be your guide. When nightmare it was deep and long. Let love be your guide. And now the air is troubled with the sweetest song. Let love be your guide. Be your guide when you're weary. Let it be your guide when you're unsure. The winds of change are on your side. Let love be your guide. Well, I may not be with you when the day is done. Let love be your guide. But I know you'll be marching till the peace is won. Let love be your guide. Be your guide when you're weary. Let it be your guide when you're unsure. The winds of change are on your side. Let love be your guide. Be your guide when you're weary. Let it be your guide when you're unsure. The winds of change are on your side. Let love be your guide.
Right.
Yes. All right. This next song we're going to do is a song we wrote called For the Long Night. As we know, we all lived through 2020 and the effects of 2020 and how that all had just such an impact on us. And so we wrote this song. It's a lullaby. You know, we believe that rest is a revolutionary act, claiming your peace, claiming your rest. So this is a song that we dedicate to all the mothers, the fathers, the people of the world who need rest. Teachers. Yeah. Sister, here's a song for the long night. Sister, here's a song for the longest night. Sister, here's a song for the long night. And I'll sing with you till the morning comes.
Oh, brother, here's a prayer for the long night. Brother, here's a prayer for the longest night. Brother, here's a prayer for the long night. And I'll pray with you till the morning comes.
Mama, here's a dream
For the long night. Mama, here's a dream for the longest night. Mama, here's a dream for the long night. And I'll dream with you till the morning comes.
Ooh, Father, what's your wish for the long night? Father, what's your wish for the longest night? Father, what's your wish for the long night? And I'll wish with you till the morning comes. Neighbor, here's a hand in the long night.
Neighbor, here's a hand in the longest night.
Neighbor, here's a hand in the long night. And I'll build with you till the morning comes. And I'll build with you till the morning comes. And I'll build with you till the morning comes.
Beautiful, guys. Beautiful. The I think I may have missed the intro. Were those both originals?
Yeah, they're both originals.
How old are they? When did you write them?
So we wrote them. They were part of our social isolation song series that we did in 2020. As we were all under this pandemic, we didn't know what we were going to do as creatives, as artists. And we just felt that, you know, our offering in this time is music. That's the gift we know, and that's what we know how to give and share. So we started writing songs. And so these two songs were birthed in that time.
You guys did a show every day for how many days?
200.
But who's counting out there?
Right.
And with a different background every time, is that right?
Yes.
Most times, yeah.
Every time.
Every time.
I've been stuck with the same. I got this sort of between the ferns look here, with
Yeah.
that little tree.
Maybe it'll bloom or something.
Yeah, it might bloom. I hope so. The song about leading with love, let your love be your guide. It feels like that's central to a lot of the anti-racism work that is part of your musical work and part of your personal life. Can you talk a little bit about? I'll ask you, Dan. When did you start to think critically about race and your role in the racial narrative in our country?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you exactly when. It was a conversation I had with my friend Mike Feldstein, who's my oldest friend in the world since we were teenagers. And when I started making music for families, I was living in Brooklyn, New York. And, Mike and I had stayed in contact, sometimes a little, sometimes a lot. And he had begun doing, I think it was called at that time, anti-bias work with Dr. Beverly Daniel Tatum, who wrote the book, Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria?
Sure.
And, and I thought this is great for Mike, to have meaningful work and finding his way in the world. I knew it had nothing to do with me because I wasn't prejudiced, that was the beginning and the end of my understanding of anything that, I'm basically a good guy. And so Mike's got his path, and I had a lot of stereotypes around who that might apply to. And anyway, I called him up one day to tell him about a show that I had played at PS 29 in Brooklyn, and just talking about how diverse the audience was, the student body that we were playing for, and how we played a multicultural selection of songs to sort of celebrate that diversity. And so Mike asked me, who was I playing with? And I said, some dads that I know. And because that was, I never thought twice about it. That's just what it was. And he said, were they white guys? And I said, yeah, I played in a rock band. That's all I knew. And he said, well, I have a question for you. How do you think the experience was for the Black girls in the audience compared to the white boys in the audience? And it was such a, it was such an unusual question, and it wasn't something I'd ever stop to think about, because really I'm playing music for kids. This is pure altruism. What could possibly be wrong or up for critique in that? And but this was a loving conversation with an old friend. It wasn't, I wasn't being called out. I wasn't being challenged. It was,
right.
Mike was and is extremely skillful in the way that he talks to other people, other white folks. And so in the course of that conversation, I was introduced to the idea of systemic racism. And so that, it's a system, and I'm in it. And it was through that conversation that my life changed. And, and I asked if there was and Mike found a way that, to interest me in this, that made me want to learn more. So I asked him if there was a book I could read. And he said, how about I'll start with Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria by Dr. Tatum. And, as soon as we hung up, I thought, oh man, why did I ask about a book? It's going to make me feel terrible about being white and this and that. And it was the opposite. It was the opposite. I read the book because I said I would. And I felt, I began to feel liberated. I began to feel liberated because in that book, Dr. Tatum explained the world that I'd been living in for 30 something years and never understood. There was low level confusion and certainly avoidance of situations for me. As a white guy, I didn't want to go into situations that weren't predominantly white because I was afraid I'd say something that would show my ignorance or maybe sound racist or, for whatever reason. I could only be comfortable in settings where I was the majority, So there's no real humanity in that. When you can only connect to the people around that look like you. So, I was walking through in this sort of, it's like sleepwalking, man, I'm sure we've had conversations before, which have been so good for me, to be able to connect with other white folks and to be able to start to look at our lives and say, like, this is how we grew up. But then I'm reading this book and my perspective shifts. It's this radical shift. And in that, I started to see that, I don't want to, eat up all the airtime here with this. You just were asking
I'm glad you're right into it. Yeah. No, go ahead.
Yeah, but just to finish up, that's how I got into it. And why I believe in conversation is because I had one that changed my life. And I'm forever grateful to Mike Feldstein for that, who's over in Newton. He's your neighbor. And
yeah, and I hope to meet him one time. You've mentioned the first time we really talked was last year in the wake of George Floyd's murder, when but in the family music world, a lot of us were thinking more critically about what can and should we be doing differently. I had a lot of important conversations at that point with a lot of folks, white folks, black folks, brown folks. And you mentioned Mike at that time to me, and we were just getting started with the group, which now is called Family Music Forward. And a lot of stuff's happened in a year. It's been a tumultuous year in family music and children's music. But I'll say that the very first time, so when I started doing kids music, which was sort of like starting over again in a lot of ways. I was almost 10 years into a career as a singer-songwriter. We had kids, we had our twins, and I put out a first kids album, and I went down to it's a Kindy, what was it called at the time? Kindy Fest or what? Anyway, Kindy music stuff, yeah, in New York. And I was so like wet behind the ears. I didn't know anybody or anything. And you were speaking at that conference and speaking in a focused way, in a way that felt more precise and willing to put yourself out there about race at that conference. And it was very inspiring to me. It also left me sort of like your first conversation thinking, oh, because my first album was made with the same, kind of guys that you made yours with. It's the people that I've played music with for years.
Right.
And it's taken me 10 years to kind of wrap my head around how can I approach this differently? What are the things, the changes I can make? But I think the biggest changes, and this is something you and I have talked about a lot, are the ones that happen internally. And those are the hardest ones to get to. But you can't do everything else is sort of performative until you could get to that. It's not just a matter of changing what your lineup looks like. It's changing what this part looks like.
Yeah.
Claudia, what was your experience in the music therapy world? It's a world I don't know a ton about. Did you feel that your work in that space was how race conscious were you? It's a hard question to ask any Black person in America, right? Like, what day are you not race conscious? But how did it affect your work, or how did you see that field as you got into it?
Well, I've been aware of race, of course, since I was, I've always been aware of race. It was challenging. I had a lot of challenges in the field of music therapy. I had a lot of great support, a lot of great mentors, of course. But there is sort of this sort of Eurocentric model that is oftentimes used when it comes to the therapeutic approach, and not considering other cultures necessarily that have contributed to music and the music that we're also using. So it was challenging. I found that it was really important for me to connect with music therapists who look like me, mentors that look like me. Finding support systems even outside of the field of music therapy was really important. I've had some pretty intense, I don't want to go into them, but situations occur that were challenging. And to be honest, it's hard for me personally. It's hard to talk about issues of race in predominantly white spaces. It's a boundary that I've especially had to put up for myself in the wake of 2020 and everything that was going on in the world. And I just wasn't ready to have conversations with people who aren't necessarily living an anti-racist lifestyle and engaged in an anti-racist practice as well. But as far as music therapy, I was thriving in the field. I really love the field of music therapy and how music can be used to enhance our lives and how music can be used to deal with trauma and all these things. But I had to really find my support systems in order to be the best practicing music therapist I could be.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to unpack in there. I'll just say a personal connection with music therapy. It was a field that I knew very little bit about, and then I don't know if you guys know, but we have twins, and one of my twins had leukemia when she was 5, and it was the first time. Well, I started writing songs with her in the hospital because where we started, there wasn't a music therapist around. So it ended up being very therapeutic. But of course, I'm not a music therapist. It was a personal father-daughter, which became an album. But later on in the process, as Cleo was exposed to not only music therapy, but art therapy, it was such an eye-opener to see the power of those fields, especially with children, or at least that was our personal experience with it, right? My respect has just grown. I think, a thread that runs through all of this is that music and art, it touches us in a very deep place. And sometimes it allows us to address things that are harder to address through just conversation.
Right.
Whether it's talking about race or it's working through what it is to feel different in neuroatypical ways, or being sick and being 5 and not knowing how to articulate that, but being able to draw it out or sing it out. Right. The issue of talking about predominantly white spaces, and I think I can safely say that this is probably one right now that we're in online here. Although here's my friend Reggie Harris. Rock.
Reggie.
Hey, Reggie.
Reggie.
We love Reggie.
Yeah, we all love Reggie. Is, I think, a big learning curve for me these last couple of years is realizing how exhausting it is for people of color to discuss things that are new for so many white folks, and to have that conversation over and over and over again.
Yeah.
That's why I might end up doing a lot of the talking here tonight.
Well, you know what it is for me, Alastair? I compare it to music. Like I, as a jazz vocalist, I could go deep about Carmen McRae or Ella Fitzgerald or Thelonious Monk. And if folks are only able to talk about, I don't know, the wheels on the bus, whatever the song, but if we can't really go that far until people have done certain work, and then we can really engage in a meaningful conversation. So for me, it's just, I am exhausted, and I know that many Black folks in my circles are exhausted as well. So I really had to be clear about that boundary that I set in terms of who I engage in just talks of racial tension.
Right. And I think that comes back to what constructive white conversations and other white affinity groups are all about, right? And maybe, Dan, what the role of folks like you and I and everybody else who's willing to jump in, white folks, what the role is that we have to play here. I mean, what do you think about that? But we'll get back to some music soon.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a blessing, man. I want to thank your church community for doing this, and thank you for doing it. And so it really is a blessing to, we love playing songs, but this is somewhat unique. We've done some keynotes, that involve music and race, but it's not every day that we get to have these kind of conversations and go deep. And I think that's a shift in white culture. That's what I want to believe, is that there's a shift in white culture, which is a shift towards anti-racism, not just as a nice idea, not as a sign in the yard, but as a way of life, a daily practice. And I don't want to say that I think racism or white supremacy conditioning is a mental illness, but I will say that I believe that, I don't know if it is or isn't, but I will say I believe that a lot of the things that have helped me with my alcoholism and drug addiction, and we're all friends here, so I'll keep that on the table. A lot of the things that have helped me with that have helped me in anti-racism. And by that, I mean, I have to be aware that I have alcoholism, so I have to take care of it on a daily basis. And I can't do it alone. When I go up against my alcoholism's going to win every time. I need other people. I need other people going through the same thing. So community is essential, and spiritual growth is essential. And that's you're talking about that internal work. I mean, I really believe, everybody suffers. Everybody suffers in this white supremacy
in this system that we're all living in. Everybody's suffering in different ways, very different ways. You know, my experience and Claudia's experiences are wildly different, but we're all paying a price for this conditioning. So in other words, you know, as white men, we got work to do. We have healing to do. I mean, I feel like this conditioning has told me some things that have, you know, have affected me on a deep, deep level, and you know, spiritual brokenness that comes with it. You know, to walk down the street and see somebody walking towards me and have like a deep-seated fear because they're a Black man. You know, like, what is that? That's some, you know, that's some deep and troubling stuff. But if I wasn't in community talking about it, that's the stuff that would begin to move, you know, towards the front of my being, and it would influence the way I made decisions in the world. I mean, I'm just using that as one example, but there's thousands. But you know, every time we pull out a coin, every time we pull out a bill, we see a white man.
Representation.
The representation is there. We are. We're everywhere, man. You know. So what does that tell us about? You know, there's underrepresented. You know, we talk about that a lot, but overrepresented. You know, that's just so damaging. You know, like that sense of entitlement starts to build. You know, It's like, well, I deserve this and I deserve that. You know, and
I think it's also the understanding of doing this work not for Black folks either. It's really for your own liberation.
Yeah.
Part of it all.
Yeah, that term collective liberation, thank you for that. It is so essential, I think, because sometimes we get into it, you know, and I know I certainly went through that phase too, where, you know, I'm going to do this to, you know, I'm going to help Black people now.
Right.
You know, like I don't have any problems of my own. I'm just going to go help Black people, you know.
Collective liberation is a term that you introduced me to. Although the concepts behind it, I think, really are at the heart of what the internal work that's required of anti-racism. You know, that's it. That's right there, is the understanding that I'm untying my own knots here. I'm not doing this for somebody else. This is our system. It traps all of us. It puts us all into a prison. And, you know, we walk around with this fear. Fear of conversations, fear of saying the wrong thing, fear of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. I think one of the conversations you and I had too, Dan, that really stuck with me is you talked about that part of the practice of constructive white conversations is it's not just like a 6-week class. There's a lot of these kind of classes sort of introducing white folks to anti-racist texts. And although they're certainly not, you know, I think it's sort of people's time, right? But there's nobody engaged in that who's saying 6 weeks and you're fixed. But constructive white conversation takes a different approach because it's more of a monthly check-in that's more sort of like an AA model, right? And I think you used the term at one point, backsliding, that those daily check-ins help stop you from backsliding with racism.
Yeah, I don't know if I use that term, but that concept is real.
Well, I remember it, but I may have made it up. It's certainly possible. Let me put up. I have a little ad here, or this is from the Constructive White Conversations website. And you guys, you hadn't always been online, right? But now these meetings are online, so they're available to everybody everywhere. Yeah,
and we have people coming from around the country, and actually a few people are coming in from Canada. We got someone coming in from Africa, and it's you know, and just so I in case I don't want to neglect to say that, you know, we're healing, we're doing internal work, we're finding community so that we can be useful and find a sense of purpose in dismantling these systems that are devastating communities of color and have been for hundreds of years. So, you know, it's the internal work so that the external work becomes possible, and that's going to look different. external work is different for each one of us.
No, that's important to say, right?
Yeah.
The internal work is, I think, required, but it's not the end. That's not where we're aiming to. I just posted in the comments section constructivewhiteconversations.org, and I encourage everybody to go check it out. I've been to one group meeting, and I will definitely be coming back at some point.
Yeah. Thank you, man. We're trying something new tonight. We're letting our puppy roam freely. So some of these sounds that you might hear.
I like it. I'll tell you what. How about I'll let you guys deal with the puppy for a minute, and I'll play a tune.
I would love to hear a song, man.
Yes.
All right. Let's do that. I'll see you guys in a minute.
Okay.
And while I have you all here, I want to thank the Melrose UUU Church. That's my hometown of Melrose, Massachusetts. The AntiRacism team, headed this year by Josh Shortledge. I put up earlier Reverend Suzanne and Trilligator had written a comment. For those of you who don't know what UU is, it stands for Unitarian Universalism. And it's a very gentle approach to religion. As somebody who didn't grow up in it and struggled with some of the doctrines of religion in different spaces, whether from my Jewish tradition or the Christian traditions that I also come from, in the Unitarian Universalist world, I found a place that seemed to have room for everybody, and a community that's very conscientious about trying to continue that sort of state of beginner's mind, of continuing to learn. And all of us stumble and struggle and make mistakes constantly, but the process of learning and paying attention and living an examined life is part of what happens in that space, and I appreciate it. I'm going to play a song, one of my sort of family music-oriented songs, since we have family music-oriented people on tonight. This is from my album, Be a Pain. It's a song called Everybody Was a Kid. Two little eyes staring from a crib, a tiny little mouth drooling on a bib, a tiny little fist with a tiny little grip. Before they grew up, everybody was a kid. Malcolm X was a kid, and Dr. King was a kid. Mahatma Gandhi was a kid. The Dalai Lama was a kid. Before they got tall, before they grew big, they used to be small. Everybody was a kid. You are a kid. You got dirt on your hands. You wipe them on your shirt. Yeah, you wipe them on your pants. But one of these days, you're gonna get real big. How do I know? 'Cause everybody was a kid. So where you gonna go? And what you gonna do? Who you gonna be? We're waiting on you. We're holding our breath, though we keep it well hid, because we all know everybody was a kid. Oprah Winfrey was a kid, and Angelina Jolie, even Bill Gates and Muhammad Ali. Before they got known, before we knew what they did, before they got grown, everybody was a kid. Two little eyes staring from a crib, a tiny little mouth drooling on a bib, a tiny little fist with a tiny little grip. Before they grew up, everybody was a kid. So where you gonna go? Yeah, what you gonna do? Who you gonna be? We're just waiting on you. We're biting our nails, but we keep it well hid, because we all know everybody was a kid. Bring my guests back in here.
All right,
Hey, guys.
That's good, man.
Thanks, brother and sister. I thought we could talk a little bit. That song has something to do with what's happening in family music, and I think why representation is so important. It's something that you realized early on in your children's career, Dan, that kids needed to see themselves up on stage. Increasingly, as I've grown and gone through my career as a family musician, I've come to see that it's not only important to see, but important to hear, not just being on stage, but being centered, that the voices that kids hear look like them up front, right? And those of us who have had some success in this field, we have a job to do in helping change what children's music can look like. I think that's something you've been involved with for a very long time, sort of making sure that ladder goes down and that you're helping folks up. And it's certainly something that folks like Pete Seeger, somebody I know we both look up to, did throughout his career, including with Reggie Harris, who was here. What do you guys think about where children's music is at today and where it's headed and what could be done differently and better?
Well, it would be good to just take a minute to sort of to say that, when after my conversation with Mike Feldstein, I started to think about that, and so fast forward a couple years, and I had the unbelievable honor, if you can imagine, that I was in a band with, not only was I in a band with Father Goose, but I was also in a band with Sonia de los Santos and Eleanor Moon Park and Yoshi Wacky and Colin Brooks all at the same time. And Barbara Broussal and a number of incredible people. But I could see, so I thought in the beginning, this is, a multiracial group of men and women. That's that's a good thing. That's the right thing. What I didn't expect was every single aspect of my life would get better, because of these people. I was thinking about the audience. I didn't even stop to consider what that was going to be like for me. And it was like being in school, man. I was able to see the world from all these different angles, so the idea of going back to that, more monolithic approach to making music, I would never do that, man. I would never do that. Once I had that experience with that group of people, that to me was like like seeing the future. What a joyful a live experience it was. So I just, I thank them as people and as musicians and as, and I'm finding my way into anti-racism and I'm fumbling all over the place, and everybody's patient and everybody's cool and, but man, oh man,
and the music comes alive in a different way. You have so many voices and so much representation there that you just couldn't do with a monolith. It's just not possible. So I just feel like you walk different too. When you're around people and you're comfortable in various settings, life is all the more richer,
One of the things I learned along the way, maybe it's obvious to say, but I think it's important to say for other musicians, for ourselves, is that part of the difference between doing what can come across as performative and actually getting in there has to do with building the trust. And it's something I didn't get for a while. For example, Dan, I looked at your band and thought, well, it looks like the United Nations up there. I want a band like that, or I want my albums to look and sound like that. And I would reach out to people and realize, like, I don't really know the person I'm reaching out to say, do you want to come sing on a song? And I couldn't see at the time that when I ask a Black musician to come sing on my song, especially given how grounded and rooted my music is in Black American music, I'm asking for a lot. I'm asking for them to give me a gift of sort of a sort of approval or sort of some sort of stamp of authenticity. And if that's not coming from me, from a place that we have earned that together, then it can be even exploitative. It's sort of like, can I use you to make myself look better?
Right.
This year in the world of family music, I think part of what's been so transformative is that a lot of musicians have been thinking differently about how they should be involved, how they can listen to other performers of color, and how they can help center those voices. And I'll just give a little, I don't know if I know how to do this. Let's see if I can share my screen for a second. Yeah, share. It's doing it.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Oh, it's gonna.
The sports websites.
Yeah. Is that showing up there now?
Yes.
Kakuza Fest is something that this group, Family Music Forward, put together 2 performances of this past year, which centered all Black voices, and the second one specifically Black women in family music. And they were amazing events. And I feel like these events are starting to change some of the narrative in family music and starting to change people's perception of what children's music looks like and sounds like, and who's invited to the table. You guys performed on the first Kakuza Fest.
Yeah, and it was incredible. Again, like you're saying, there's so many tremendous, magnificent musicians in their own right, creating beautiful content, and to have a space where it can be heard and appreciated that was priceless.
It'll be nice too when the Children's Music Hall of Fame inducts Charity Bailey and Bessie Jones and Ella Jenkins, and really, because there's so many. There's a history. There's a super strong history. So it's gonna be
not to mention all the folks you and I mean, grew up on, people like Leadbelly and Mississippi John Hurt, who aren't primarily known, well, like Bessie Jones, but all made music for kids.
Yeah.
360 performers, but people who made music for everybody.
Yeah, but it's been a blessing. Family Music Forward has done tremendous work, and it's it's really been good. I think family music is doing in a way as a genre doing kind of more than a lot. So it's a beautiful thing, and it's nice to see how the community has come together and embraced the idea of change.
I think so too. I'd like to. We should we should talk about what how the money situation works tonight. So the Melrose UU Church is paying guests to come be part of this, which is a great gift from them. But we're also raising money through donations from you all watching tonight, and that money will be shared between Dan and Claudia and an organization that they chose, which is the Black Church Food Security Organization. You guys tell us a little bit about the work that this group does?
Yeah, well, the Black Church Food Security Network was established, I think, in 2016 by Pastor Heber Brown III. He is the pastor of Pleasant Hope Baptist Church, which happens to be our home church here in Baltimore, Maryland.
Okay.
And so, you know, he really works with congregations, Black churches all over the country, working with Black farmers. And, you know, their mission is really steeped in food sovereignty and making sure that the congregations, the people, the communities have access to wholesome foods, learning how to grow on the property you have, but also learning how to establish growing in your own home. You know, we learned a lot during the pandemic with everything. You go to the grocery store, there's no toilet paper, there's food is flying off the shelves. We really learned how you can take some of these foods. He did his whole Zoom series, you know, going to the grocery store and learning how to make a garden based out of the foods that you're buying, the produce. So that
Right.
potato you got with the eyes and the stuff's growing out of it, plant that in the ground and you see what comes of it. So they're doing incredible work getting kids involved. They've got Zoom classes. So anyone, they really want to make sure everybody knows what they can do to take care of themselves and their community.
It seems it's been great to learn a little bit about them. It's one of my things that I'm loving about this series is that I get to learn from the guests about something they're passionate about. And it seems like it's one of those organizations that really it works at both ends of the stick. It's providing food in Black church spaces, and it's also working with Black farmers. It's got both of those ends happening.
Right. And we appreciate, because the pastor, you know, we can't just focus on our spiritual health. It's really about us in this present time too. He really makes sure that we're aware, and we, you know, you can't be so heavenly bound, you know, earthly good. You got to think about taking care of your community here while you're here as well.
We had heard about Pleasant Hope Baptist Church when we moved down to Baltimore, and we went to a few churches on our search, but the minute we went in, there was a different feeling, different kind of electricity in the air. And, we became members that day. We didn't really have to think about it, you know, and the social justice mission at Pleasant Hope is strong, and it's evident in every aspect of church life.
Yeah.
What's your backgrounds? Did you grow up in the church, Claudia?
I did. Yeah. My family is steeped in the church. My parents are from the island of Haiti, right? The first Black Republic. And so out there, you know, my grandfather was a pastor. He, you know, instilled in my mother and all of her siblings the importance of a relationship with Christ. And so when they came here, we found a church. We were in church every Sunday. I've been singing in church. I mean, I'm steeped in the church community. Those were my aunties. Everybody, you know, so it's family, really. It's not just where you go on Sundays, but these are the folks that would come over after church, come and pray with us when we're going through challenging times, bring food when a loved one passes. You know, it really was the community that lifted us up in dark times and celebrated with us in joyful times as well.
Mm.
What about you, Dan? Did you have any of that background?
My mother tried, man. She took I grew up in Concord, New Hampshire, and she took us to the Episcopal Church, but it wasn't, you know, Claudia. I never met Christ. You know, let me put it that way. Claudia introduced me to Christ, and we started going to Bethel AME in Boston when I'd go up on weekends, and I was baptized at the Lenox Road Baptist Church in Brooklyn. You know, so I was saved in these churches, and but thanks to Claudia, and a very different experience for me to and I think that's, man, I was tossing and turning last night, with, I was thinking about this, it's like, it's a blessing to have an opportunity to have this kind of conversation. So I was tossing and turning and I was thinking about it, and just, and I think for me, and I appreciate that we're under a church umbrella here, because I think that that's for me where I think anti-racism, it's such a process, limitless. And I think where I want to go, where I think I don't know much and don't know enough is connecting Christ's teachings to anti-racism. And I know there's a strong and deep connection, and it seems kind of obvious to say that, but I know that there's a lot more to it than I really understand. So it just kind of feels, and I think it was my tossing and turning last night that made me realize that. It's just like, I think I know what the next step in this is for me. So I'm grateful to Melrose UUU for, giving us this chance so I could toss and turn.
I'm glad. I'm sorry you tossed and turned, but I'm glad. Yeah, the UUU Church is something I'm still learning about. It's a very different approach to religion. There's a joke in the UUU Church that the only time Jesus' name is mentioned is when the janitor falls down the stairs. Or Vance Gilbert, I think, hit me with that joke just recently. Last time he was on, actually. There's something about including everything that sometimes you can feel like, you're shopping, you're window shopping. And I've always envied, honestly, those who have a religious conviction, because that's something you can't mimic with just the head. It's something that comes from the heart. It's funny, I think probably this is something we all share, but gospel music, and especially Black gospel music, hits me in a place that no other music does. And even when I can't always get behind some of the theology or positions of specific churches, that music, the passion that it comes from, the connections historically with the way it powered the civil rights movement in the South, how central it was to John Lewis and Dr. King and Rosa Parks and everybody, different up north. But I think that's something that's important to know too, is that there's a lot of different approaches to this, right? Malcolm X had a very different relationship with a different kind of religion that wasn't music oriented, and still found all of the passion he needed in that space to change everything. But it's something that, I'm a seeker. I'm still trying to figure it out. My Jewish mother won't like where this conversation may be going, so she thinks I'm gonna go get myself baptized sometime next week. I better slow my roll.
Yeah, I'll tell you, man, it works for me.
All right.
I'm just grateful. I'm grateful that I was saved when I was, man.
Would you guys play us another song?
Yeah.
Sure.
We'd love to hear you.
Let's do Coming Down.
Which one?
Coming
Okay.
Down. All right. Well, here's another one. It's on our new record.
Our new record, which is coming out later this year in September.
Yeah. And it's called Let Love Be Your Guide. It's on Smithsonian Folkways.
It's called Coming Down. Oh, yeah. Okay, gotcha.
The song's called Coming Down.
Yes.
And you'll hear as we get into the song, it could have been a whole lot longer. We could have had 50 verses.
Can you see it coming down? Can you see it coming down? Can you see it coming down? Someday we could all be free.
white supremacy coming down. Bars of oppression coming down. Oh, hierarchies coming down. Someday we could all be free. Militarism coming down. Capitalism, it's coming down. Oh, and patriarchy coming down. Someday we could all be free. Oh, voter suppression coming down. Isolation coming down. Oh, hierarchies coming down. Someday we could all be free. The sun will shine and the rain will fall. The world will turn and bring the morning to us all. One way or another, we will choose to love. Well, there's a dance tonight. Are you coming down? There's a dance tonight. Are you coming down? There's a dance tonight. Are you coming down? Someday we could all be free. Someday we could all be free. Someday we could all be free.
Yes.
Lovely.
Thank
Will
you.
that be on the new album?
It will be, yes.
I love that you have a song that uses the phrase white supremacy in an album that's aimed towards kids and families coming out. That feels like another in a new step forward, right?
Yeah.
You know, I think so many folks worry about what you can talk about with kids, and certainly, the more you do this, the more you get a feel for kind of there are some subjects that are hard to grapple, but I think issues of social justice, not only can you talk about it with kids, but it's such a unique opportunity to work with a blank slate, or to get in and talk about things before all those walls get further built up.
Yeah.
What's the rest of this album? What's the concept? What will make this is your first album with Smithsonian Folkways, right?
No, this is my first record, of course, but this is Dan's second, the Lead Belly Baby record.
Oh, the Lead Belly one was with them too. Okay.
Yeah.
Because before that you were on your own label for a long time, right?
Yeah.
So it's exciting. It's very exciting. But I think sometimes we do underestimate the kids' ability to take in information. And I think these are conversations, these songs are really seedlings, if you will. We're offering an opportunity for families to engage in conversations at their pace, what they feel comfortable with, but it's an offering to at least to help initiate the conversations. We don't feel in any way that we're here to educate and to teach it all, but it's really the family's job, if you will. But I remember in church, there was a saying too, like if you don't raise your children, the world will do it for you. So I really believe that as parents too, we do have that responsibility. Kids can take in way more than we give them credit for sometimes, and I think about a lot of Black families and the conversations we're having very early on, because it's survival. And so I really think that this is the time, as we have seen in 2020, everyone lived through this. It's right there. We all remember it. It's fresh in our memory. And so it's really important as these kids are growing up, that these conversations are being had.
Yeah, I love the way you phrase that too, Claudia. It's very much the way I think about our role in this too. Is that it's not as people we're educators. As musicians, we're educators. We're uniquely tasked, I think, as musicians. If you're in family music, but the job isn't to provide the answers. I think asking the questions or starting the conversations, planting those seeds, that feels like the important work, because the conversations are going to happen at home. And I can imagine a kid hearing that song, and it's going to lead to a conversation. What's that mean?
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. And it can't be Dan and Claudia there explaining it to every kid. It's going to be mom and dad, or mom and mom, or dad, right? Like, but you're opening that door. That's as the sign above us says. Yeah.
And it would be, it would be easy to see it as a song about white supremacy or capitalism or militarism, but it's a song about freedom. And when if you make it to the last verse, there's a party.
Right.
So there's, and I think that's so much of why, let love be your guide is so important, because when when we're really invested in this kind of love, we want freedom, and we want freedom for everybody. And the more you look around, and the more you listen, the more I look and listen, the more I realize freedom is not something that most of us have.
Well, I'm excited for the record, as I am for the stuff you guys do in general. We have a few more minutes, and in that time, I want to make sure I take care of a little homework here by announcing what's next. So let me pull up. You guys, I think, are familiar with Reese Palmer.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
She's great.
Yes, I can't wait to meet her in person one day.
Me too. Reese will be our next show on May 23rd, and she's a country musician, really inhabiting those spaces. She recently had her second performance at the Ryman Auditorium, or the Grand Ole Opry historically is, and she's been, every time I turn on my radio and TV, I feel like Reese is there. She's been on in the New York Times recently, on NPR, on the PBS NewsHour. There's been a lot of focus on race and music, but I think in the country music space, especially given some of the dynamics in that particular genre, some of the recent history with, country musicians being caught on tape and, reflecting really toxic racism. And, Reese's I've learned largely through Reese, she's one of many Black women in the country music scene today, but she's also been kind of a centering point, because she has this radio show called Color Me Country Radio, where she interviews BIPOC musicians in that space. And it's amazing how many people, it's an endless well. So I'm excited to hear her sing, but I'm also excited to talk to her about that genre. And is that me? That was me. Whoops. Sorry about that.
Could have been worse.
Yeah, it definitely could have. The donations from that show will be going to her own Color Me Country Artist Grant Fund to support BIPOC artists in country music. So that's very excited. And I'm starting to book along with the church for the next fall. We'll be taking the summer off. Sorry, guys, I should have probably let you guys have a break while I talk about this stuff, but I left you up. Sorry about that. We're starting to book for the fall. We'll be going again in September, October, November, and I will announce at the next show, but have some incredible musicians lined up. And really, we're getting into, so we've kind of explored a little bit with the folk singer-songwriter world. It's a little family music country. We're going to get into some classical music. We're going to get into Latino music and different kinds of genres going forward. So I'm excited to see where we might take this series and hopefully continue going with it. Can you tell us a little, Claudia, about your other business? You're like an octopus. You got a lot of stuff going on.
I'm Haitian, Alastair.
Enough said.
So in my other life, I am a soap maker. I actually started making soap about 3 years ago. I was really inspired after I'd met Dan and I was moving to New York. I was thinking about my plastic consumption, all of this stuff, and thinking about, what am I putting on my body? And I started taking soap making classes. I fell in love with the process. I find soap making to be fully in alignment with music making. It calls for creativity and patience and improvisation, spontaneity, and you get inspiration from just a walk through the park can inspire all kinds of soaps. So yeah, I've been making soap for, like I said, a couple of years. I have my own website now, cleosoaps.com. Everything is handmade. Oh, look at that. Wow. Yeah, that's part of my Mother's Day set, actually.
They're beautiful.
Thank you. I really try to, my whole mission is, bathing with dignity and creating artful bars of soap. So when we pamper ourselves, that's our time to ourselves. It should be a ritual. It should be special. And sometimes it's the most intimate part of our day. You're with yourself. And so why not nourish your skin with incredible ingredients? So I use a lot of different coconut oils, essential oils that I know are good for Black skin. I make soap for Black skin first, but it's good for all skin types. Mm-hmm. So there's shea butters in there. There's cocoa butter in there. Haitian, there's an oil called Huile Mascreti, which is it's pretty much liquid gold on the island of Haiti. Everybody's got at least 3 wine bottles of Huile Mascreti in their house. We use it for everything. If you ingest something, you use it on your skin, use it in your hair. It's for growth too. So I use that in all of my soaps as well. So yeah, that's a little bit about Cleo Soaps. Everything is handmade with soul and love. So I hope you'll support. I want to say too, one of the cool things I saw, Alastair, in 2020, when everybody was, of course, the murder of George Floyd, everyone was up in arms, everyone's protesting, everybody was hashtagging Black Lives Matter. But what I really saw too was that people were really being mindful of how they're spending their money. It's easy to throw up a hashtag and to throw up a photo of George Floyd, but how in your daily practice are you really walking with your Black brothers and sisters? How are you supporting Black businesses? And I saw a tremendous amount of growth in 2020 where people really were putting their mouth where their money where their mouth is. And just supporting and saying, you know what, I am going to make a conscious effort to support Black business. So those of you who are interested in that, again, I am a small Black business, woman-owned, woman-run. I'm a solo act. So if you want to try something out that's new, I would really appreciate your support, not just for my business, but other Black businesses out there as well.
Yeah, well, and they're beautiful soaps.
Thank you.
I think that's a really important point that you just brought up was, how can people be more actively anti-racist? And, there's no one solution, right? It's not, hey, I bought something, now I'm good. Mm-hmm. But I think thinking in a rounded way is important. It's not just about the signs. It's not just about protesting. It's about the positive sides too. So if it's amplifying voices within music, if it's amplifying my wife's a writer, and it was nice to see some of these same movements happening in the publishing world. I'm forgetting the name. Somebody, I think if Jane's writing, there's several writers watching, I know. What was the day? Was it called Blackout Day?
Oh, the Tuesday, or what was it? Blackout Tuesday?
Yeah.
Yeah, something.
Something like that.
Yeah, I remember that.
A long time ago.
It was a long time ago. And, one day isn't going to do it. Mm-hmm. But that kind of, it's the intentionality of really thinking about, one of the things that that's been helpful to me in recent years, hearing from Black folks in education. I spend a lot of time in schools. Is that Black kids so often hear only the negative parts of their history in schools, which means white kids also do. And here in Melrose, a wonderful woman, Amy Jackson, who runs our METCO program. It's a historical Boston program. You guys know that Boston families, predominantly Black, may choose to send their kids out to suburban schools in largely white areas, and for the opportunities. But it's a system that is rife with trouble. The communities are not always welcoming. There's a lot of assumptions about who is coming into the communities, etc. And Amy shared with me, as we were talking about some of these, what's going on in our schools in our particular town, that she hears from the middle school Black kids. We only ever hear the negative stuff. We want to hear some positive stuff. Tell us about, and the peanut doesn't do it. You can't stop at the peanut. Like, there are a lot more Black people to celebrate. And unfortunately, it's not largely in our curriculums, right? In school, it's not on the test. And so it takes schools, it's in public school spaces, really pushing that agenda. Maybe did I lose my train of thought? I may have, but I guess it was important for me to hear that we can't always just be focusing on the hard parts about race. We have to be celebrating race and culture. And when we do that, we need to think about how we do it, not in a sort of, hey, let's go ask white folks to tell us about Black history, but where are the Black voices that can come in and teach us about that history? Where are the Native American voices that can come in and teach us that history? How do we find those resources, and how do we support them to amplify them so that there's more of them about and more prominent?
Right. And how do the history books reflect that as well?
It's such I know, Dan, you have kids from a previous marriage that are probably all grown up now. Claudia, do you have kids?
No, just my stepdaughter.
Your stepdaughter. Did she and yours, Dan, did they come through public schools? What was their school experience like?
Yeah, she's one and the same.
Yeah. She is
Oh,
my stepdaughter.
that's your stepdaughter.
But,
okay.
Yeah, no, she went to an independent school in Brooklyn. It was kind of the school that everybody wanted, certainly in the arts communities wanted their kids to go to. And she graduated without reading a single book by a Black writer. And I say that it's partly the school, it's partly me too. I was asleep at the wheel, and I hadn't evolved enough. I was kind of thinking about myself for so much of the time, and I hadn't evolved enough. So I had to share responsibility for that. But I was blessed to go to a fancy private school for a couple of years when where I graduated from high school, and same experience, man. It was the school that George W. Bush went to, and never read a book by a Black writer. So I came out totally unprepared for the world,
right.
in that Eurocentric curriculum. So it's beautiful to see that times are changing.
Right.
It's such an uphill battle. You've mentioned it, and I know for me, of all the texts and things I've listened to, that podcast, the New York Times podcast, Nice White Parents, was one of the most powerful in deconstructing what white supremacy is, but also specifically the education system. What an uphill battle it is. There's so many layers of baggage and barrier. It's this year, other than Family Music Forward, I've also been here in Melrose, and I know some of these folks are watching tonight too. We started a racial justice community coalition here, and it's been a real learning curve for me to work on local issues. Is something I've not paid attention to much of my life. I'm a junkie for the news and national news, but paying attention to your backyard, what's happening in your schools, what's happening in your mayor's office. Not only is it critically important, but it's something you can actually have an impact on in a really tangible way, especially in a small town like this. And I'll say for myself, I think maybe, Dan, it was you who recommended a book. Maybe you had just read it at the time. It was called Waking Up White and Finding Myself in the Story of Race by Debbie Irving, who's from near here in Winchester, Mass. It was one of the first intentionally anti-racist texts I read. I read it after Ta-Nehisi Coates' book, Between the World and Me. And one of the things that jumped out at me about Debbie's book was the concept that wherever you are, you have work to do. And I think I had sort of fallen into the trap of feeling like, well, we ended up in a very white community, so there's nothing, we can't do anything here because we're very fond of saying everybody here is white in a sort of exasperated liberal, what can we do way. But it's not all white. If it's, if you live in a town that's 85 or 90% white, that means it's 10 or 15% not white. And that means you actually have a huge opportunity to do work. There's a lot to be done, right? That was a wake up for me. And I think it spurred me from sort of feeling like, well, what can I do? Because I would have to be in a city, or I'd have to be somewhere where there's a larger community of color to be able to get involved in anti-racism work in a useful way. And coming to the realization, like, no, if you're in a very white area and you're white, then get off your ass and get to work, because there's a lot to be done.
Yeah, man. I mean, and I would argue if it's 100% white, there's work to be done, because you're still, you're still existing with the white supremacy conditioning. You're still poisoned by this, the culture that we grow up in, and that takes a lot of unpacking. If only, even if it's for the, if it's all white people, that unpacking still needs to be done, because we still live in this world. So it's no matter what. And, and as you were talking, I was thinking that sometimes one of the things that I wonder is, I don't know what the other word for it is, but, I think we all generally refer to it as the work, the anti-racism, the work. And I wonder if that's the right word for it, because it's, for a lot of reasons. One is, it's a blessing. It's a blessing to have the awareness that there's this need to do this stuff, and there's joy in it. And there's this sense of, we talked about liberation. There's just so much upside to coming out of this lie that we are taught, We've been watching the Exterminate All the Brutes, the Raoul Peck series. And it's so, it really highlights the mythology that we grow up in, that sort of celebrates this kind of aggressive, destructive, genocidal foundation, and so to unpack all that stuff, it's a blessing. It's a blessing, and so I just wonder if we'll find another. It's why I don't. I'm not sure that using white privilege and white fragility, if these are, there's a lot of negative stuff behind these words. And I think for me, when I started hearing that kind of language, I started to feel a little bit, like, I don't know if I want to go there, but when I hear collective liberation, I think I want to go there.
Well, I've really appreciated talking through a lot of this with you, Dan, over the last year. You and I have not known each other well. We've sort of been in the same circles for a long time. I pulled up, I embarrassed Vance with a picture of us playing tennis. I don't have a picture of us playing tennis, but
oh, look at this! Wow, man!
Here's you and me with Elizabeth Mitchell.
Yeah.
Story.
Yeah.
It's Story, yeah. Dan has, I gotta say, a little more hair there, maybe. 2014.
I remember that. It's so good, man.
Feels like a lifetime ago. But
Yeah.
this past year, you and I have talked a number of times on the phone, and it's been I've learned a lot from you, and I've realized too, like I need to talk to other white dudes along the way.
Yeah, man.
It's something
That's
this
right.
past year, especially, I haven't done much of. I've spent most of my time in this world being often one of the very few white dudes and learning a ton, but we need to, we all need to find others that are in our skin, in our boats, so that we can process some of what we're going through. No, whoever you are, whatever you bring to the table, that's your bag, right? And in talking with you, I've realized how much, like, I do need to check in. I need to think about and talk to other folks who've been thinking about this for a long time. And I know that that's part of your process and what Constructive White Conversations is all about.
Yeah, man. And I mean, that's the thing too, is that, you've been given this gift of being able to, find yourself on this path. And so like me, I feel like getting this gift, there's a responsibility that comes with it, which is to talk to other white folks about it and bring other white people on. Because like me, I'm sure that the things Mike Feldstein told me I had heard before, but I could not hear it. I could not hear it from anyone but Mike Feldstein. I had to hear it from another white dude that I had a relationship with. So part of it too is this building of relationships so that we can begin to go deeper and we can begin to help other, white folks, which in turn helps us. I don't want to say it's a two-way street, this thing that we do. And so that's, that's a big underlying thing about Constructive White Conversations. And that's, that's a great thing that, that you were real clear when we were talking last year and you said, hey man, I want to be able to, have more conversations. And that to me was a bold move because, as men, we're not always, we don't always communicate that to each other. We kind of leave it to chance. And so I think that was a very evolved kind of thing because we all got 1,001 things going on, we don't always take the time to develop relationships, and that's white supremacy conditioning too. I'm a rugged individual. Come on, man. I don't have time for relationships, not with other white dudes who, might take my piece of the pie or, whatever it's going to be, it's crazy, but we need each other. We all need each other.
Absolutely. I'm looking through some wonderful comments and nice thoughts from folks here. Nice to see people tuned in. I know we had a big ask tonight with another award show. It's not, you always try to think these things through, right? And like ultimately you still end up going up against the Oscars or how many times have you had a gig and it's like, oh man, the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Right.
Several times a year it's the Super Bowl. So
yeah, it feels like that'll teach you as a man to not pay enough attention to the Super Bowl, I guess. I always know when the NBA games are, but I don't know when the Super Bowl is. Will you guys play us out one last song and we'll let folks say goodnight and they can go find out who wins Best Picture. It's been such a pleasure.
Again, this has been such a treat. And thank you to everyone who tuned in. We know you could be watching the Oscars, but we're grateful you came by. We got one more song for you. This too is going to be on the record. It's coming out on September 10th. This is New Beginnings. I think we can all agree that this is a new dawn. It's a new day. We are all looking forward to new beginnings.
Everybody's talking about new beginnings, new beginnings, new beginnings. Everybody's talking about new beginnings.
New beginnings, all out in the open now. New beginnings, don't you wanna go? Who'll be right on time? Who'll be there in line? Who'll be left behind? Who'll come running? Well, don't you know that they're coming? Open up your heart to new beginnings. New beginnings. New beginnings, together we can walk through new beginnings. Don't you wanna go? Well, there's a morning in the midnight. New beginnings, new beginnings, new beginnings, all out in the daylight. New beginnings, don't you wanna go? Dancing to the rhythm of new beginnings, new beginnings, new beginnings, moving to a new love, new beginnings. Don't you wanna go? Who'll be left behind? Everybody's talking about new beginnings, new beginnings, new beginnings. Everybody's talking about new beginnings. Don't you wanna go? Don't you wanna go? Don't you wanna go? Everybody's talking about new beginnings. Yes, they are.
I love it. What a great song to end on. New beginnings indeed. Thank you guys for being part of this. And
Thanks for having us. This was great. Thank you.
Everybody who's watching, please feel free to make a donation to support Dan and Claudia, and also to support the Black Church Food Security Network. They'll be sending half of their donations over there, and tune in next time, May 23rd, for the wonderful Reese Palmer.
Yay.
Yes. Be safe. Take care. Thank you so much, Alastair.
All right, guys. I'll see you soon.
All
This
right.
is great. Thank you, brother.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.